that we are recording this session. So as I say, welcome to this webinar. Delighted that you can join us today, and we're going to be joined by people as we go through, but we'll make a start as it's now 1 o'clock. What we want to do is, let's just move these slides on, is first of all, as I say, my name is Rob Martin, here on behalf of Learning Futures. I'm going to be joined by Ben Verrill from Toffee Hammer Productions, and Ben's going to say a few words in a moment, but before he does, I'm just going to take you through a quick introduction. But Ben's our guest expert speaker today. So this webinar forms part of a 3-stage process within the CPD framework, and this step 1 is the webinar where we are able to tap into Ben's expertise, and he's going to share with us some of the insights based on his experience working in the industry. Following that, well, I'm going to take you through some online resources and some CPD activities that we've put together, and they're there for you to pick and choose and dip into what you think is going to help you most. But the idea is to support you apply some of this learning back into your place of work. The deal is we provide those opportunities. We'd ask you then to create any examples, use this stuff back in your organisation, but then share it through the Learning Futures website, and I'll show you how we do that at the end as well. As you may be aware, this webinar today is part of a series. Some of them have been recorded already, so the recordings are available, but some are yet to be delivered. So keep an eye out on the Learning Futures site, and you'll see if you wish to attend one of the live webinars. But there's quite a host and range of areas on there, so if you find today's useful, then feel free to come back and have a look at either one of the recordings of the others, or as I say, book yourself onto one in the future as well. So today's agenda will be, I'm going to hand over to Ben in a minute and ask Ben to introduce himself and deliver his input. There is going to be time throughout Ben's presentation. He's going to pause now and again for any questions, and we'll use the chat area to take those, and there'll be some questions at the end as well. And then to finish off the webinar, I'm going to run through the online resources and the CPD activity. Now this system relies on our internet connection. Touching wood, we've had no problems so far, but if you suddenly find that everything's gone quiet and you feel that your screen is frozen, you may well have found that your internet connection has kicked you out of the webinar. All you need to do is come back in again. It will take about 45-60 seconds to come back in again, and as I say, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to pick up the recording after the meeting. If one of the presenters, myself or Ben when he's presenting, if you find that they drop out, then the other person will be there that will just take over, and again it will take us about a minute just to come back in. But as I say, everything's been tickety-boo so far, so it shouldn't happen. But if you find it suddenly goes quiet, either enter the room back yourself, or we'll do the same if there is any problem. But I'm now going to stop sharing these slides and just load a second set of slides, and whilst I'm doing that, just going to ask Ben if he can turn his microphone on and just introduce and say hello. Want to introduce himself, please.
Hello everyone, can you all hear me? Do you let me know if you can?
I can hear you loud and clear, Ben.
Lovely. Okay.
I'm just loading this.
Oh, the slides loaded?
Just taking a couple of seconds, it's just doing it now. There we go. Brilliant. Over to you, Ben.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I hope that over the next half an hour I'll be able to share some things of use to you. This first slide, you can see me at work. I'm the chap in the cap and the schoolboy coat, not doing any work at all, apparently. Actually, everyone else is working around me, but that's what I do for a living, is I direct videos, apart from along with some other things. As you can see, the image that I'm sharing is one where I've got a full professional crew with me. But just to give some context to the sort of work that I do, I work both at the high end of video production, but also at the very practical end of video production, encouraging people to use their iPhones, their smartphones, or any other device that captures audio and video, and specifically to support learning. At the end of this presentation, I've got some examples of work that I've been involved in as a video producer, so you can see the sort of work that I do. The focus for my presentation today is very much going to be on the editorial side of video production, the sort of thinking skills that I believe are required to make a fantastic video for learning, not so much on the practical nuts and bolts skills of how to use a camera and so on. We've got 30 minutes. There are lots of really good resources online that help you to learn how to use your iPhone effectively, how to edit and so on. Many of those are in the CPD pack that accompanies this particular module. So I won't be focusing on that. This will be very much on the thinking skills that go behind video. Just got to remember how to use this. There you go. So here's a small, actually, array of the sort of clients that I work for. As you can see, there's some big names there. But just to emphasize, while for some of these clients, I'm working with large budgets and big crews in order to produce videos, others, I'm actually getting them to work with the sort of material, the sort of equipment that you might be using or you might be familiar with. So one of the biggest names here is Rolls-Royce. In actual fact, most of the work I've done with Rolls-Royce has been about them using the iPad to gather evidence, to record interviews with their colleagues in the field, to really bring down the cost of video production. And then I've helped them to editorialize that and think about the sort of questions they're asking, and also to think about the sort of end results that they share. So just to give you that sort of idea that this is really about thinking, it's not about production. So I'm going to pause straight away and ask you if you could, just for a moment, reflect on what you think makes a great video for learning. I'm assuming that everyone here has had some form of teaching or learning experience that's included video. So just a few words in the chat box just to tell me about why a video worked for you in a teaching and learning context. That's fantastic. Simple, direct and appealing. Couldn't agree more. Short and engaging. Short, absolutely. Ah, that's a good one. Help to explain abstract concepts. Abstract concepts, yeah. In a short way. Clear learning outcome, absolutely. Relevant to curriculum and visually appealing. All excellent answers. I shall share with you my answer. I'm a great believer in the use of video for in two ways, really. One, where I'm most involved in video is when it involves people. So often that's about helping people to connect emotionally with a subject matter. So it might be an abstract subject matter, or it might be a very sort of concrete topic that's being described. But either way, I believe that it's a very good medium for helping people to connect emotionally. So I used an example recently about some work I did on preparing people to work with people with disabilities, physical disabilities, as part of the DDA, Disability Discrimination Act, a few years ago. And the core content was very practical. It was all about the sort of measures to put in place in order to welcome somebody with a disability into your organisation. So, for example, the use of ramps and making sure that there was access to the building, and that your staff were appropriately welcoming. My involvement was to engage with some disabled people in order for them to explain why that was so important to them, and to give a human side to what otherwise was a very dry subject. So a lot of what I do is about people, and you'll see that most of this webinar is biased towards that type of content. However, I totally agree with all of the comments that you've made about videos being short, focused, and to the point. I believe videos are fantastic for provoking discussion. They invite learners to analyse and think. You're able to present an argument and then ask them to be active, to sit forward, not sit back when watching a piece of video. And crucially, they can be rewatched many times, especially if they're short. And I absolutely echo all of the comments about short videos being really quite important. My reason for that is I think that the shorter the video, the less likely it is going to feel like it's transmission learning, the less likely it's going to feel like it's a lecture, and the more likely it's like to feel like an asset from which you can learn from rather than be taught by. I'll explain that a bit more as I go along. So just very briefly, I'll explain a little bit about how I got to be so interested and passionate about using video as a medium for learning. Life is never a straight linear line. When I was 16, my ambition was to make television programs, drama, feature films. And I went to my local FE college to learn media production. I have to say that that was the foundation for all of my learning since. I didn't get on particularly well at school. I didn't enjoy formal classes, but I loved the environment of the FE college and the freedom it gave me to experiment and to take on projects. And much of what I learnt when I was at my FE college, which happened to be ECAT, Eastbourne College of Arts and Technology, which dates me because I'm sure it's not called that anymore. Then I went on to film school, and then after film school I was looking for a job, and I found one making cookery programs. Now, I didn't know how to cook, still don't, but again, in terms of a learning experience, I think making about 50 hours worth of cookery programs taught me a huge amount about teaching and learning, and about instructional video. If you think about what a cookery program does, is it compresses a process into a short period of time. It presents that process in an engaging way. Looking back at the some of the comments, it's having an engaging presenter is what makes a cookery program entertaining. And it also breaks up a process into short, manageable chunks so that you are able to follow a procedure from ingredients through to something you can eat in a way that both engages, entertains, but also educates. So after that, I've worked on all sorts of things. I've worked with the Department for Education on teacher training programs, as well as on a lot of resources that are designed for use in the classroom with teachers and students. But I based most of my experience and my knowledge on the 2 years I spent at ECAT, and then the 3 years I spent making cookery programs. Where am I now? Well, I now run a production company called Toffee Hammer Productions, and the reason it's called Toffee Hammer Productions, you'll see that there's a bit of reinforcement through repetition here, is because a toffee hammer, if you're not familiar, is a rather antiquated tool that was given out free with big slabs of toffee in the early part of the 20th century. And the idea was that the person who bought the toffee was to use the hammer to break the big slab of toffee into small, manageable chunks. And I think that's what I do most of the time when I'm working on video for learning. What I try to do is I take a sticky problem, a difficult to understand concept or process, and then I smash it with my toffee hammer to produce something that is digestible and hopefully enjoyable to eat. So I mentioned cookery programs, and I've already described some of the things that I learned by making a huge number of cookery programs in terms of teaching and learning. And I've summarised it with these 5 bullet points. What I think are the ingredients of a great video are that you start with a very clearly defined purpose. So talking about it being relevant to the curriculum, talking about it being short and to the point are absolutely relevant. If you know what the outcome of the video you want is, whether that's to provoke discussion or to transfer information, then the chances are you're much more likely to produce a really good video. Understanding the purpose and who it's for, your audience, are key to making any form of learning asset, but it's especially true of videos, which can take time to produce and so therefore need to be very focused and very much designed for learning in mind, not just for entertainment. And that goes back to the sit forward, not sit back approach. You want to make sure that what you're doing with video engages the brain, not just the eyes. Preparation is important. When you're making a cookery program, you've got to make sure you've got all of the ingredients ready prepared so that you can do a 2-hour process in 30 minutes or less. Presentation is important, so that's about engaging the learner with how the information is presented. Now, this doesn't have to be a physical presenter, it doesn't have to be a teacher, but certainly thinking about the ways in which you're presenting information is really important. And finally, process. I think process is really vital when it comes to video for learning. Video is fantastic at showing process in a formative way. So if you're seeing something being made, that's much more exciting than seeing the finished product and having someone talk about how it was made. I think that one of the best ways in which you can use video is to show process and formative process and formative learning in a way that helps people to learn for themselves. I'm going to pause there just for a moment and ask if there's any questions at all. And Rob, if any come up, please do facilitate. Okay. So I mentioned at the start of the presentation that I have a very big bias towards using people in video. I think that video is a very human medium. So although there are a huge number of types of video, I thought it might be useful to share with you some of the conversations that I have with clients around different types of video. I mention this because it's astonishing how often I enter a room with a client, often willing to spend quite a lot of money on a project, who says, we want a video. And they don't think about what the video is for or what type of video they want. And it's a bit like saying, we want a piece of string at any length you desire. There's so many different types of video. I think it's important to realise that when you're making decisions about video, to think about the format that you're using. So I focused on a few that involve people, and they're the sort of things that you can film using an iPhone. They don't need big production behind them or expensive equipment, but they do need a lot of thought behind them. So the interview. I've actually broken the interview down into 3 different types of interview. First one is the talking head. This is the most familiar type of interview that you may come across and can easily be filmed. I'm imagining in a learning context, you might have access to an employer, for example, or some expert in the field that you only have access to for a short period of time. Maybe they've come in to be a guest lecturer, but it's a one-off event. Fantastic opportunity to get some of that expert input down onto tape. A talking head is one way of doing that. What I'd say about talking heads is that they can be very boring. And the reason often that they can be very boring is that they're used in the wrong way. If you're going to have an interview, you want to bring across the human side of the story. You don't just want people to convey information that might be better summarized as text. So you don't want someone just talking about the procedure, as for example, of in my field, making a video, because actually that would be far better represented by a bullet pointed list of things to do on a film set. However, if you were to be interviewing me, you might ask me about some of the problems I've encountered over the years while I'm on set making a video, or to talk about the sort of role of the director and the type of skills that a director needs. So the key thing with using talking heads and interviewing people one-on-one is that you focus on their experience rather than their knowledge. A discussion interview is a fantastic way of bringing across, modelling a debate. So particularly with students and you're introducing a controversial subject, you could actually film some students themselves debating, talking about a subject, or you could bring in some experts, or you could film members of the faculty discussing a subject. The thing is about an interview is that you're presenting fairly different points of view about a topic. If you think about Jeremy Paxman, he's expert at facilitating this type of interview. So you have somebody from one political party putting a case against someone from another political party against someone who's got some expertise in the field, and a good news presenter will be able to bring in those different points of view without giving a point of view themselves. So this is a really good way of trying to film an introduction to a debate. Another way of introducing different points of view, but it's slightly different, is the Vox Pop interview. And again, this is a really quick and easy thing that you can film within a college situation or within a workplace to get different points of view about something. And these used to be the man on the street interviews. In fact, you still see them all the time in news items where, say, there's been a government policy and we go on to the streets of Brixton or Eastbourne and find out what members of the public think about this particular topic. It's really good to present diverse viewpoints and to raise issues. It's also very good for informal quick tips. So if you went around asking students for their tips about exam technique, for example, you might do that as a Vox Pop. The key thing here is to keep it interesting, and the way to keep it interesting is to make sure that you are not just having meaningless sound bites, but each person has something that they say, whether that's about their point of view or whether it's a bit of information that they're able to convey. And finally, presenter-led. So this is a different way of conveying information. This is about authority. Now, you could exchange the word presenter for teacher. A teacher stands in front of the class and is given the authority to teach a topic. A presenter stands in front of a camera and has the authority to inform about a topic. So, you know, this could be a subject expert, it could be a teacher, it could be a student. The thing is about presenting is that you are owning the content that you are presenting. And it might be that someone else has written a script for you, but a good presenter will carry authority with the words that they say. The most important thing about doing a piece to camera is that you need to be relaxed and make eye contact with the lens. It's very easy to lose authority when you're presenting to camera, and that's by looking away from the camera or looking shifty. So a lot of people think, what would be really good is if I put some idiot boards up, write my keynotes on my computer, put it underneath the camera and so on. Actually, those things don't really work. An auto cue allows you to look straight down the lens of the camera and read at the same time. Whereas anything that takes your eyes away from the lens is likely to make you look shifty and make you lose authority. Any questions at this point? Okay, so Dawn's asked about technical points about recording talking heads. A very, very simple technical point is to do with sound. People will forgive all sorts of things in terms of images, but sound is the most important part, I would say, arguably the most important part of any video. And that's true of, say, feature films, where it's often said that the soundtrack makes up 90% of the experience. If you watch Star Wars with the sound down, you'll see that it's not an exciting film suddenly. But in the terms of a more practical nuts and bolts thing, if you're looking at recording interviews, getting good, clean sound is vital to the overall experience of the video. And the best way to do that is to invest in a cheap microphone, plug it into your iPad. There are ones out there that clip onto your lapel. They only cost 30 quid. They work brilliantly. If you can't afford a microphone and you don't have one to hand, just get the recording device as close as you can comfortably to the person speaking, because that will mean that the microphone's picking up your voice much clearer than you would if you were stepping back from the presenter or the interviewee. Actually, that's a fantastic tip generally when recording video. People are so afraid of getting in close. If you get in close with your camera, you are much more likely to pick up detail. You are much more likely to create something that feels very immediate for your viewers, and it's generally creates a much more intimate style of program making. And that's true if you're, say, showing how to fix something in a car or do something on the computer. The closer you are, the more detail you're giving your viewer. So those are my two technical tips that apply no matter what type of video you're making. Here are some other top tips. So these top tips are to do with editorial. So the first big one is show, don't tell. Video is a visual medium, and it works best when you're showing something rather than telling people something. So this applies when it comes to interviews. It goes back to what I was saying about the human touch. If you are showing someone to be an expert, that's the difference. That's different from having them tell you that they're an expert. So when you're thinking about when to use video, think, am I showing something or am I telling people something? And I think that's probably a big deciding factor on whether to use video at all. On that note, use video sparingly. And now I think this echoes some of the points that you all made earlier about the types of good experiences you had with video. If you only use video in the mix, then people will get tired and bored of using video. If you use a variety of different modes of delivery in your teaching and learning, whether that's online or actually in the classroom, and you reserve video for when it's actually going to have some impact, then you will find that it's one of the best tools in your toolkit. But overuse video at your peril. Here's the one, the biggest one. This is about sitting forward, not sitting back. It's often said, and I've heard it so many times, that video is a passive medium. Well, it's not. Television is a passive medium. Films can be a passive medium because they're designed to entertain. They're designed to make you relax. I often fall asleep in front of the TV at the end of the day. But that's because the TV program makers are there to entertain you. They are trying to make you relax. They're trying to help you sit back in your chair. The learning video producer is trying to make you sit forward in your chair. They're trying to make you really engage with the subject that you're trying to convey through video. One way of doing this is to make sure that when you're planning your lessons, and whether that's online lesson or a live classroom experience, that when you introduce the piece of video, you're giving your learners a real purpose for viewing that. So ask questions before the video is shown, and then check learning after the video has been shown as well. I know that's teaching and learning 101, but it's amazing how often I see people forget in a classroom situation or even as a part of e-learning to have that setting up of the learning that goes along with the video, and trusting that people are going to be ready to absorb the information in the video in their own way. Again, keep videos short and engaging. Couldn't agree more with all your comments earlier. And also make sure that you're communicating things, not just lecturing things. So what I mean by that goes back to the point I was making about the disabled people I interviewed around the DDA Act Part 4. None of those people were giving practical advice. They were just explaining what it feels like to be excluded from a building. They weren't going the next stage and saying, so in order to make your building accessible, follow these points. That was covered with text. It was covered very well with text. So communicate, don't lecture. Bring out the human side. I think I've said this a lot, so looking at the time, I'll not dwell on this, but I'm passionate about people, and I really do believe that video is the most effective medium for presenting people in the best way possible, bringing out their human side, bringing the human side of a subject. And that's true whether or not you're describing something very practical, like how to change the oil in a car. The presenter will bring out their human side and engage the user as much as it is if it's about something that's perhaps a little more obviously involving people, for example, interactions, job interview and so on. Script for speech. Now again, this I think is a good rule of thumb for any content online, not just video, but try to make your script sound like it's natural speech. That doesn't mean being overly informal. It just means writing in a way that you would feel happy reading it out. And the best way to do that is reading it out while you're writing and editing. If it sounds clunky, it probably is. If you get tongue-tied, you might have a few too words in your sentences. This last point is really to sort of be the antidote of the picture that I showed at the start of this presentation. So I showed myself on set with an actor in costume, a sound person, someone on auto cue, an expensive camera. But to be honest, had I not had the budget available for that shoot, I could have done the same thing with an iPhone and a volunteer. The most important thing is that you think about the editorial. It's not about the kit. It's not about how expensive the camera you're using is. If you match the medium with the message, then you won't go far wrong. So, for example, when I'm working with Rolls-Royce, I encourage them to use iPads because they're filming real-life situations on the shop floor, and that's what they've got to hand. So everyone accepts the fact that the footage is a bit more grainy, it's a bit shaky and so on, but they're privileged that they've got to see an insight into a real situation that they otherwise might not have seen. It's a lot to do with access and a lot to do with authenticity of material. And I mentioned mobile phone cameras, but there are other ways to record things. For example, we're recording this webinar. If you're connected to Skype, you might decide to interview the world's leading expert in your field via a 15-minute Skype interview, and you can capture that interview, you can record that. And funnily enough, that's probably better than recording things on a camera because they'll have a good quality web camera and a decent microphone, so everyone will be able to hear what they're saying. So there's a wide range of tools available to you to capture video, but again, I'd urge you to think about why you're doing it. That's the most important thing. As long as your content is compelling, learners, your viewers, they'll forgive picture quality. And if there's one message that I could leave you with, it is just to remember just to sit forward, not sit back. That's what you want your viewers to do. That's what you want your learners to do, to be fully engaged and not seeing it as a break from learning, but seeing it as a very stimulating input to their teaching and learning. There's a few links there. They're all things that I've made over the years, a real range of things. I've avoided some of the stuff that you might be familiar with already from working in the teaching and learning fields, but there's some ideas held within each of these resources that I hope you can learn from and use in your own experiments with video. Interviews, great place to start. A great place to start thinking about editorial, the sort of questions to ask, and also the sort of edits you make to make sure that the videos themselves are compelling and short. But there's also examples of quite cheap drama, things that I've shot using amateur equipment but edited to a high standard. And also, particularly if you look at the Sky resources, so for example, person-centered care and safeguarding adults, you'll see that the video is embedded in a curriculum of sorts. The whole learning experience is considered. So you'll see within that that you're always asked a question before being presented with a piece of video, and you're given a box on which to reflect on the video. So I think I've run over ever so slightly, but I'll hand back over to Rob.
Ben, thank you. That's really helpful. We've got a couple of minutes, if you've got time, Ben, just to take any final questions from anyone. So if there are any questions, if people would like to put them in the chat area, just whilst we've got Ben with us.
Absolutely no problem at all.
Thanks, Ben. I can see that Joe, I think, is typing.
Dawn's got a quick question there, which I can answer quickly. Both Windows and Apple Macs come with editing tools pre-installed. Windows, it's Windows Movie Maker, and with the Apple, it's
iMovie.
Thank you very much. Both, I have to say, both pieces of software that compare very well to industry standard kit that I was using 7 years ago that cost £60,000. So you have, I mean, they take a little bit of time to use, but you'll find loads and loads and loads of really good instructional videos on YouTube about how to use both of them effectively. And the best way to learn is by experimenting, but they are free. And similarly, on smartphones and iPads, there are free and low-cost editing packages. I haven't used them. I'm not sure I'd necessarily recommend them over using something on the desktop, simply because it will be a much quicker and better experience using a desktop computer. But if that's all you've got available, simple trimming on your iPhone is a very effective way of removing the preamble and the postscript of any video clip that you produce, and that's built into the video camera software.
Brilliant, thanks, Ben.
And Paul is saying iMovie is great on the iPad as well. So thank you, Paul. I didn't know that about that. Yeah, if that's true, then that's fantastic. I believe they all video packages, editing packages, the most important thing they allow you to do is to order content and to trim content. And if it does that, then that's all the tools you need to make a compelling video.
Brilliant, thanks. Ben, just as a final question, you may see the question there from Joe, just saying that they use a variety of devices from phones to tablets that are Android and Apple. And Joe was just asking whether you had any recommendations of a solution that takes all of those different types of media formats.
Absolutely. I don't have a simple answer to that, unfortunately, but I have a lot of experience in taking in movies from a variety of sources. The thing to bear in mind is that pretty much every device, every camera, certainly every make of camera, has a different way of recording the data. So, for example, on the iPhone, I think they record MOVs. On an Android, it might be a WMV or it might be an MP4. These are basically ways in which video is encoded, so what the data looks like effectively. In order to edit from different sources, what you need to do is make sure that all of that source video is the same and works on the edit package that you're using. So to give a concrete example, if you're using iMovie, what you need to do is a process called transcoding, which takes all of the video you've got from the multiple sources and makes sure that they are all compatible with iMovie, which would be to create QuickTime mobs. The way to do that, you can get free software to do it, both on the Mac and on the on Windows machines. So I won't go into the details now, but it is certainly something I can follow up with, particularly if I know the specific circumstances of the different types of video being used. And it's actually, it takes time, as in the computer needs the time to do the processing, but it's actually very, it's not very labor intensive. It's the computer that does the work, not you.
Brilliant, thank you, Ben. Excellent.
Paul also has recommended YouTube, by the way, so I meant to say that. YouTube has come on leaps and bounds in the last 18 months. The editing tools on YouTube are fantastic, and the other thing that YouTube has is a fantastic free library of music. And it's also got a huge amount of information about how to avoid copyright issues. So if you want a one-stop shop for your first foray into video making, YouTube is a really, really good place to start.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. Just before Ben leaves us, I would just like to thank him for his input. It's we try to make sure that we're able to link in industry with the sector, and something that Ben obviously has many years of really good expertise in, and we're very grateful to him to be able to share his time today and answer the questions. So Ben, I'm going to close down your slides, but thank you for your time today. It's been invaluable having you here. Because I'd just like to take us into the last couple of parts of the webinar, and let's just bring this up. Okay, so we mentioned that there were 3 steps to the CPD module that we've put together. The first step is we've just had an input from Ben sharing his expertise, and what you should see on the screen in a couple of seconds, it's just loading, is the learning future. And I'm just going to navigate to the CPD section. As soon as that loads, okay, just going to scroll down to today's webinar and today's module. So we're looking at the Video for Learning module, and as that shows on your screen, or split into the 3 areas. So we've got the expert input from Ben. I'm just going to move us on to the resources, so you can see that I'm just scrolling down to the resources and scoop it. We've had a researcher go online and say, okay, with all of the things that are available online, where would be good starters for 10 for people? So specifically, Ben mentioned he was looking at some of the thinking ideas through with putting video together. What we've done online is built on that as well and gone into some more of the technical aspects as well. So if you have a look through here, I know one of the things that Ben speaks very highly of is the Vimeo, and that you see on the right hand side where you can click on the video score and start to have a look. And we've chosen some of those, for example, choosing a camera, some editing basics, some shooting basics, and we've done that trawl online for you. So if you're saying, okay, I want to get into a little bit more about looking at where should I go next, then we'd point you in the direction of the research that we've done through the Learning Futures site. What I'd like to do is just bring you back to you as well. So I'm just going to bring up a quick document. Okay, that's going to load on your screen in a couple of seconds. Great. So this document is intended to help you apply this back in your place of work. So as you say, okay, great, well, Ben stirred up my interest in this, I want to do a little bit more about this. I know that there's some research there, but really I just need a bit of help to get me started. We've put some activities together to help you pick and choose which of those that you think are going to be useful. So the first one is an activity that you might say, okay, well, if I'm getting started, what's the online research, what's the online tools that I might want to be pointed towards? You can see it's got the number 30 next to it. That's the amount of time, 30 minutes, that we'd recommend that activity will take. But if I scroll through those, the activity B is about having a go. Activity C about getting stuck in with shooting video, so a little bit about the shooting side. Activity D looks at showing some top tips on making a training video, and I think there were some really useful parts that Ben shared with us about, sort of a bit like a checklist of what we might want to consider as we're thinking through. Well, again, we've got some areas there. And also then activity E is just to draw your attention to the Learning Futures projects. There's a couple of projects there that are using video, and we'd recommend that you use the Learning Futures site to keep an eye on what those projects are doing and some of the tools and resources that they're sharing. So as I say, the idea of the CPD activity that you've got is not really to start with activity A and work your way through, but just to pick and choose the areas that you feel are most helpful. Now, if you do find something there that's useful, that something that's Ben said, something of the online research or the CPD activities, we'd ask you to go onto the Learning Futures site and either just to pop a quick blog in there once you're registered as a member, or to use the useful resources section and just to upload anything that you've created. So if you were to create a checklist, anything like that at all, we'd love to hear how you've got on with it, what's worked, if there's been any stumbling blocks, and every now and again, if you've got questions, then we'll make sure that we get answers back to any questions there as well. Just going to bring us back to our original slides. Okay, they're just loading now. Okay, that just take a couple of seconds just to load. There we go. Brilliant. So as I say, 3 stages to the webinar that or the module that we put together. We've had the input from Ben, have a look at the resources and activities, and we'd hope that you use that, create something yourself, and then share that as part of the communities of practice on the Learning Futures site. A final thank to Ben for his time. I think that there's some really useful content in there. Following this session that we're just about to finish, we're going to be sending you the link to the recording, so you'll have that straight away. But other than that, can we thank you for your time? If you found it useful, we hope you come back and look at the other modules as well. But other than that, thank you for joining us today. Hope that, as I say, has been useful, and we hope to look forward to seeing you in the future at some time. Okay, I'm just going to leave the chat area open for a minute or so, and then I'll close the meeting. But Joe, thank you for your comments. Paula and Christina, thank you very much for your comments as well. Thank you, Steve. Ben, thanks. Dawn, thank you for your comments as well. Okay, I can just see, I think, not sure if Sue is typing. We're just going to bring this to a close, so I'm going to turn the recording off. Thank you, Sue, for your comments. As I say, if you found it useful, then by all means pop back and have a look at the other ones, but good luck as you start to engage with looking at using videos, and we hope that works out well, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.